Hello everyone. Back again with film recaps. In this video, I'm going to recap one of the thriller suspense films from 2025, titled Neighborhood Watch. Before we get to the storyline, I'd like to wish everyone a happy and great day. Without further ado, let's get straight to the storyline. The movie begins as a guy named Simon heads to a local restaurant for a job interview. The manager checks his CV and asks why he has a 10-year employment gap, to which Simon hesitantly claims that he was at the hospital due to a medical condition. But the manager notices scars on his wrists, causing her expression to suddenly change. This is when Simon begins hearing static sounds inside his head, followed by a voice, who calls him a pathetic failure who can never land any job. Simon urges him to go away, but the voice reveals that the only way to do so is to end himself, something he failed as well. Suddenly, Simon jolts back to reality, but starts seeing the manager as a disheveled, half-dressed man. Panicked, he blurts out a nonsensical sentence, after which the man suddenly disappears. The manager is now fully aware that Simon is crazy, so she politely ends the interview. Elsewhere, at the local campus cafeteria, a middle-aged man named Ed spots a kid stealing some food. He immediately confronts him, saying he's campus security, but the boy shrugs him off. This prompts Ed to spray him in the eyes with hand sanitizer and handcuff him. But when they reach the campus security office, the chief, Jeremy, is furious at Ed for causing trouble again. It turns out Ed doesn't work here anymore, he's just a former guard holding on to his past authority. Jeremy forces him to uncuff the boy, and warns to call the real cops if he ever pulls something like this again. Later, both Ed and Simon, who turn out to be neighbors, return to their respective homes. Simon lives with his sister, Dee Dee, a college student who studies in the day, and works night shifts to keep them afloat. She asks about his job interview, but Simon brushes it off without answering. It becomes clear that both of them are struggling financially, and that's why Simon has been applying for whatever jobs he can find. Ed, on the other hand, leaves completely alone and has no family members. The next morning, Simon goes for his health checkup, where he asks if something can be done about the spasms, but the doctor reassures him that they're only side effects of the drug he's been taking. The doctor then shifts the conversation, and asks if Simon has experienced any hallucinations, or episodes of confused speech, but the latter lies that he hasn't. On his way home, Simon notices a commotion in a nearby alley. He hides behind a corner, and watches as a masked thug slaps a woman and forces her into a van, and that's when he realizes the woman is being kidnapped. At this critical moment, the voice in his head returns. It calls him a failure and a lunatic, but Simon ignores it, and begins running towards the van. He doesn't make it in time, but manages to catch the license plate before the vehicle speeds off. In the next scene, Ed is resting at home, when he's startled by continuous knocks on the door. It's Simon, who frantically asks for a ride to the police station. But Ed, who thinks the boy is crazy, makes fun of him before slamming the door without even listening to the entire story. This leaves Simon with no choice, but to walk all the way to the police station, while the voice in his head grows louder with every step, and he also begins hallucinating due to fatigue. But despite the mental chaos, Simon is determined to help the girl, so he keeps going until he finally arrives at the station. He then talks to the chief detective, Glover, and explains the kidnapping scene in detail. Simon describes their appearance and their attire, but says he couldn't see the kidnapper's face. He, nonetheless, remembers one important detail: the van's license plate. Glover then assures Simon that the department will take the matter seriously. But after he leaves, she decides to run a background check out of caution, and finds that Simon has a documented history of mental illness, with past hospitalizations for erratic behavior and self-inflicted injuries. Later at home, Simon takes his pills, and is getting ready for bed. We learn that he's paranoid about something being inside the closet, so he checks it thoroughly. But the voice inside his head claims the detective would never take a psycho like him seriously, so the case hasn't even begun. Simon thus calls the detective to confirm if the girl has been found, but Glover lies that they checked the license plate, and it belonged to a car in an entirely different city. Simon becomes furious upon hearing this, as he realizes she found out about his medical history and isn't taking him seriously. Glover says she needs more details about the perpetrator, but a furious Simon knows she won't help and simply hangs up. The next morning, Ed is at home, gambling online, and he ends up losing a lot of money. Things go from bad to worse when a frantic Simon arrives at the door once again. He mentions that the girl needs urgent help because the police won't start looking for her. Ed, as usual, thinks the boy is having one of his psychotic episodes, but when Simon says he needs help from a cop like Ed, Ed's ego is boosted, and he finally agrees to listen. Once inside, Simon blurts out a few jumbled words, but quickly clarifies that it happens when he gets too excited. After he calms down, he explains everything he saw in the alley. Ed, eager to show off, pulls up a shady website to run the license plate. He explains that cops usually search only the exact number they're given, but he plans to check all possible variations since letters like S can be mistaken for 5. He types in the number, but the damn site asks for a subscription, which Ed is too broke to afford. Hence, he moves to plan B, he grabs his fake badge, and heads out to the Department of Vehicles office with Simon. Upon reaching, Ed talks with one of the staff, pretending to be the director of security at the college. He hands her the license plate numbers, and urges her to run them as it's very important. But the staff says she's not authorized to reveal this kind of information to a guard. This annoys Ed, and he corrects her that he's not a guard, but she remains firm. Meanwhile, Simon starts getting impatient, as the voice in his head claims the girl might be dead at this point. This sends him over the edge, and he ends up smashing the staff's telephone while screaming that the girl needs help. Luckily, Ed manages to calm him down and escorts him out. Once inside the car, they have an awkward conversation, but Ed isn't willing to give up just yet, so he asks to be taken to the place where the kidnapping took place. Detective Glover, on the other hand, is informed about the scene caused by the two men at the vehicle office, which leaves her in deep thought. Elsewhere, the two arrive at the alleyway where the kidnapping had taken place. Ed asks about the description of the woman, and Simon reveals that she was wearing a skirt, makeup, and it seemed she was working. Ed immediately realizes the girl was a hooker, so he decides they should head over to the red light area to gather more information. Once there, they pretend to be cops, and ask a woman if she knows anything about the missing girl. Ed even offers her a cigarette to gain her trust, but the woman doesn't give up any information at all. Dejected, the two return to their car, right when this happens. A couple of thugs start smashing the vehicle, and Ed and Simon are yanked outside forcibly. Then, a woman approaches them, who turns out to be the pimp of the area. She knows the two aren't cops, and warns them to stay away from her territory if they don't want any trouble. After the close call, Simon and Ed have a bit of a falling out, as the latter is tired and just wants to go home. But Simon refuses to give up, and insists on continuing the search alone. Something about his determination gets to Ed, and despite everything, he finds himself unwilling to leave the boy on his own. Hence, he changes his mind and decides to help him once more. Later, Ed goes to the campus security office, as he knows that Jeremy has a friend in the local police, and wants him to run the license plate numbers through that connection. The arrogant security chief expectedly refuses, but when Ed promises to never step foot in this campus again, he agrees, just to be rid of him for good. After Ed finally gets the data, he and Simon head to a nearby diner to figure out their next move. Ed explains that only 3 of the license plate variations are registered in the area, and none of them belong to a van. The plate was likely stolen, and the only way forward is to check all 3 registered vehicles in person, and find out which one is missing. In the next scene, Simon and Ed arrive at the home of the first registered owner, once again pretending to be cops. They ask about the vehicle, but the owner explains that it was totaled months ago and sent to a junkyard. He still has the receipt though, which he hands over to them. Using the address on it, the two arrive at the said junkyard, and talk to the owner, Kurt. The latter reads the receipt and confirms that he towed the vehicle here, but doesn't know where it ended up, so he gives them permission to check. The junkyard is huge and cluttered, but after searching for a while, they finally find the vehicle, which has its number plate missing. The kidnappers must have stolen the plate from this junk car to use it illegally, and this also means that now there's no way of tracking them down, as they're left with no clues. And then all of a sudden...
It's her! Ed, it's her!
Simon hears the girl screaming from inside a car that is about to be demolished, and frantically orders Kurt to shut the machine down. Simon then peeks inside the vehicle, only to realize he was hallucinating again. It's the voice inside him that starts taunting him again, and we learn that it's none other than his dead father, who abused him in the past. Ed notices Simon struggling with the voices and asks what's wrong, but the latter says he's fine. The scene then cuts to night where Ed is at home, getting ready for bed. But as he freshens up in the bathroom, meanwhile, Simon is also alone at home, consumed in his thoughts. He heads to the kitchen to drink some water, but accidentally notices the intruder beating the life out of Ed, so he rushes to help out his friend. Inside the house, the intruder holds Ed at gunpoint and demands to know why he was looking for him. This reveals that the man is none other than the kidnapper. He now wants to know where his accomplice is, so he can tie up the loose ends, while Simon quietly sneaks in. Up next, he distracts the intruder by throwing a ball, allowing Ed to stab him in the leg with a pen, while Simon snatches the gun away from the intruder. Here the man warns that if he shoots him, the girl will never be found. And then all of a sudden,
okay, Ed.
Simon blows his face off, he is left traumatized, and the voice inside his head begins blaming him for everything. But he quickly snaps out of it when the intruder's phone begins ringing. Simon then helps a badly injured Ed to his car, and drives away from there to get help. He soon reaches his sister's parlor, as she's the only person he can trust. Dee Dee is stunned to see them in such a condition, and Simon anxiously tries to explain that they were attacked. He now wants her to patch up Ed's wounds, as she's a practicing nurse at college. Seeing the condition, she urges her brother to apply pressure on the wound while she goes to deal with the customer waiting in the salon room. The haircut has already been done, so Dee Dee asks for payment, but here the customer notices blood on her hands. After the scared woman leaves, Dee Dee gets straight to work. She brings out the necessary supplies, and proceeds to stitch up Ed's wound to stop the bleeding. Elsewhere, the police have already arrived at Ed's house, after the neighbors alerted them of the gunshot. Since the intruder has been brutally killed, they're looking for Ed and Simon, who were seen fleeing the scene together. Back at the salon, Dee Dee has successfully treated Ed's wound. She also knows the entire story of what happened, so she urges Simon to contact the police, but he refuses, saying they won't believe him anyway. Just then, there's a knock on the main door, and it turns out to be the cops. Simon and Ed are hell-bent on saving the kidnapped girl, so they ask Dee Dee to stall the cops. As she engages them in conversation, the two use the intruder's cell phone and contact a saved number, only to learn it belongs to Kurt Salvage. Realizing the guy had been involved all along, Ed and Simon immediately flee through the back door, moments before the cops barge in. The next morning, when Kurt enters his garage, he's shocked to find the two, who immediately knock him out. They then tie him up to a chair, and try to force him to reveal where the girl is. Kurt vehemently denies his involvement, but Simon soon notices a Vanderton clock on the wall, which has a secret compartment inside. Upon opening it, they are shocked to find a bunch of passports, and Simon recognizes one of them as the kidnapped girl. This sends him into a fit of rage, and he suddenly starts seeing Kurt as his abusive deceased dad. Simon impulsively grabs a pair of pliers, and proceeds to rip his ears out, but Ed stops him in the nick of time. As Kurt won't reveal anything, Ed sprays him in the eyes with hand sanitizer, and warns that if not washed immediately, it can cause serious damage. This scares the life out of Kurt, and he finally reveals that the kidnapper brings the girls here to sell them. Just then, the cell phone begins ringing, making it clear that there's one more person involved in this notorious scheme. Ed demands to know who it is, but Kurt claims he's never met the person before. He's only a middleman who provides number plates for them. Ed is still not convinced, and this makes Kurt really worried. Terrified of going blind, he confesses that he once delivered a package to the person's house. He begs Ed not to call the police, and gives up the address. But as soon as he does so, Ed calls the cops anyway. The two then leave the place, and arrive at the address where the third kidnapper is supposedly present. Meanwhile, Detective Glover and her team arrive at the junkyard, and catch Kurt red-handed with the passports. Elsewhere, just as Simon and Ed are about to enter the house, Simon suddenly begins seeing his dead father again. The hallucination overwhelms him, pushing him toward a full-blown breakdown. But before he completely loses control, Ed clicks his pen, a sharp, repetitive sound that snaps Simon back to reality. Sensing its effect, Ed hands him the pen, and tells him to use it whenever things start slipping again. After this, the two break inside the house, and search every nook and corner possible. They find documents of the kidnapped girls, and Simon suddenly hears strange noises coming from upstairs. They rush up to check, but the rooms are empty, confirming the suspects have already fled. Disappointed, they return to the living room and slump onto the couch, trying to make sense of everything. But then, a strange woman slowly appears at the top of the stairs, holding an axe. The two spot her, and a panicked Ed immediately points his fake gun at her. But she simply runs away from there without causing any scene. This somehow makes the two realize that the woman was the kidnapper's mother, so they return upstairs and check the closet. To their shock, they find a hidden compartment, which Ed pries open with the help of a ball pen. Inside, they finally locate the kidnapped girl, frightened and crammed inside a narrow compartment. With the case now solved, Ed and Simon come out of the house, only to find a large number of cops waiting for them. They are promptly arrested, but Detective Glover is proud of Simon and congratulates him quietly. The movie ends as Ed and Simon exchange a smile while maintaining eye contact, something which Simon had previously been unable to do. Okay guys, thanks for watching. See you again in the next video.